simplified life, and that's another.
Now it's like you gotta email so and so, text so and so.
Well, all the while you're worrying about, okay,
afterwards.
What's Ukraine doing? Okay, how is Israel doing right now? All these, these ICE agents or whatever is happening up in Minnesota, and you get bombarded by all these worries.
On all of those things, and so they don't even want to talk about them because they're sick of arguing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it comes down, it gets reduced to, how's the weather?
Yeah, because that's all you can talk about without risk of offending someone.
We can agree on the weather is horrible.
Yeah.
Louis Landsgaard, OLV, California.
William Davis, SJS, Northern Idaho.
And this is
The Conversationalists.
This is our new show, brainstormed by Louis here, that we're calling The Conversation. The general idea is usually we'll have a starting topic for you, and we'll just talk about that for a bit, and then we'll veer onto other things. The idea is we want to just have a good, conversation that takes us where it will. Bring up ideas and philosophy, politics, religion, history, you name it, whatever, Burger King, whatever comes up. The evils of fast food, what have you, and just talk. And if we like it, and we think that you might like it, then we'll post it.
Yeah, and it came about pretty selfishly, because I was just wanting to hang out with you guys more, talk more, and, I don't know, good Catholic conversation. And
We'll do quick introductions here. I'm Dan Davis, and probably know me. I'm kind of second in command at Catholic Family Podcast, and have done a number of podcasts now. And kind of the eye behind the man behind the curtain when it comes to a lot of what we do here.
William Davis. I was a sometime contributor on the Traditionalist channel when it was up, the Thursday night On the Edge podcast that we had for a time, and as well as a couple of minor things that I've done for Catholic Family Podcast. Otherwise, just the bottom of the totem pole of the Davis family.
I'm Louis Landsgaard. I'm Dan's son-in-law, and William's my brother-in-law. I've been on a couple shows. Nothing huge, nothing important, usually background character, but so kind of a bigger debut, I guess.
So the conversation today, I think we wanted to look at just some basics, right?
Yeah, the idea I had, and I talked to this with Mom a couple months ago now, is we had a really nice conversation just around the kitchen table about Catholic friends, the importance of choosing your friends wisely, and how to consider someone a friend, and the importance of being weary with workplace and secular friends, and friends who don't share your ideas, and who don't share your culture or don't share your religion. And we had a nice conversation on that, so I thought maybe we could kind of bring that up here and talk about that and see if you guys have any further.
If you don't mind, I'll kick off here, since we've seen two generations now of families that have raised children and had a lot succeed. One of the things that we've noticed, we've kind of kept an eye on which families have successfully raised their children into Catholic adulthood, which ones haven't. Some have surprised us, and the power of their devotion, the amount of their prayer, the how often they showed up in Mass. A lot of these things were less important than you would think they would be, but the two that have always risen above every other one is, number one, did children have joyful associations with the faith in the home? Did they have parties? Did they have reasons to celebrate? Did they have happy memories of Lent and Easter and Christmas and all these different things? That was number one. Number two was good Catholic friends. And really, that I can't stress enough that those families who kind of stayed within themselves and made sure that their children were surrounded by good Catholic friends, had a tendency to keep their children into adulthood as Catholics. The ones who let them out into the world tended to lose their children into a Catholic adulthood. And I think part of that is just a dichotomy between how much the world has separated from the Catholic faith today. But that's been our observation. So I'll let you guys kind of go from there.
Yeah, no, it's most worldly things that I learned did not come from my siblings or my parents. It's definitely from bad friends, and I think it's a big struggle of mine. The habits that you build from learning from bad examples, and not that my parents allowed us to be around bad companions. It was just choices I made after getting out of the house. There's really, you feel like, to me anyways, I feel like I'm working my way out of a lot of these habits that I could have just avoided completely if I looked in the future a little bit, looked at that individual a little bit with a little bit of judgment and said, I don't think we should be friends. I don't think we should hang out ever. You're not going to do anything good for me.
What are some of the habits that I mean, not to get graphic or anything, but
drinking, use of nicotine. I was super addicted to video games, and then joking, like impure jokes, was something that just I excused and thought it was normal because that was the people I was hanging around. This was mostly when I was living in Colorado, going to a trade school, and I was dormed up with some guys that were not very fantastic. But yeah, a lot of those little things that it kind of started there, and you start making excuses. I started making excuses, worked it up, and then now I'm working most of them back, and I've overcome a lot of those things. But I think the big one was mostly just vice, like any form of physical vice and conversation.
Yeah, and it's the analogy of the boiled frog, that you get these friends, and at first they seem like they're you say, oh, they're great guys, they're great people, they seem to be
Fun.
they're fun to be around, and as people we are social beings. We all crave and need social interactions. So regardless of where you are, you're going to seek out friends, unless you're an extreme introvert, which I don't think any of us here are. And so you need that social interaction. You're going to find it wherever you're going to find it, whether that's someone you're dorming with or workplace, and it's easy to say, okay, these are just the people I work around. I don't really associate with them, and I don't stand for the things that they do. When they start swearing or tell bad jokes, I was like, I don't stand for that. But slowly you can, I think, lose. It chips away. I think it can chip away at your armor, and before you even realize that you're one of them. I mean, and not to say you are
who you're around.
But you are who your friends are.
Yeah.
Is a true statement.
And here's a really interesting thing. I hadn't even thought about this before the show. The three of us have is about as polar opposite backgrounds as you could get, because you were Catholic, but then had some bad friends. You actually were in the minor seminary during all your teenage years.
Yes, I got very, very fortunate and blessed in that the friends, when you're in your teens and between about 13 to 18, forming, your brain is still forming. And it's important to the people you associate with, and the friends you can make, and friends that you make in that period are more likely to be friends for life. Mm-hmm. So I was very blessed to be in the minor seminary and make lifetime friends with people who share the same values and same religion and as me, and who I know will hold me accountable if they see me start to fall off the reservation, and who expect me to hold them accountable if they start to mess up. So that's very, very fortunate on my end. But
my background was completely the opposite of either of you guys. I grew up 100% in the world, and then was kind of rescued from the world by our my wife Lisa, who I married into the faith, and so I think one of the things that I learned, I mean, it's one thing for me. I had kind of a strange upbringing. So I mean, great, wonderful moral parents who taught us a real good sense of right and wrong. And so I did have that going for me. I was like a Reagan Republican, and kind of had a good sense of conservative values. And so our first priest, Father Barry in Colorado, was really kind of this fire and brimstone type of preacher. And probably Lisa was thinking, oh, I don't know if this is very good. But the reality was his particular brand of fire and brimstone just spoke to me, because I kind of had that conservative spirit in me. And so I was able to embrace the faith not too hard. But I think what really took me years to understand was that there was a totally different way of living, a totally different, just the way you composed yourself, the way you managed your day, the way your thoughts went, all this kind of thing of being Catholic. And it took me years of kind of walking through the fire to detox from being in the world to being a Catholic. I don't think I appreciated how different that was, and slowly got into it. And I think by the time I kind of had this first fervor of faith, this would probably be the early 1990s, I think. And part of it is I had absolutely zero desire to go back to the old way of life. So I just thinking the other day that my high school 50th anniversary, graduation anniversary, is coming up in a few years here, and I have no desire. I've never been back to a one of those reunions. I never intend to. I've never gone back. I've never kept up with any of my friends from high school or anything. It was just a brand new life. And I think, like when St. Paul says that you're putting on a new man. For me, it was literally putting on a new man, and as much as could be.
Did you have a hard time divorcing yourself from friends, or did you kind of move away, or because I know you had friends, obviously, but, like non-Catholic friends? Did you have a hard time kind of weaning that out, or did that just happen naturally? That just happened naturally.
I think it's just I don't know if I want to call it a character flaw or whatever it is, but once we've moved on from a place, like for instance, I mean, even as an adult, we lived in Las Vegas for a time. Wonderful, and believe it or not, I worked with some wonderful, wonderful people. I even had an agreement to go back as a consultant from time to time. We moved to Nebraska, and they would start calling me, and I just wouldn't answer. I just moved on. And I think they knew I was going to when we left, and I just moved. I tend to try to live in the moment, and I don't look back. I just don't. I've never had a desire to look back.
Yeah.
So
I think that gets into kind of temperaments, because all of us here, I think, are somewhat different temperaments, and all of us and people, depending on their temperament, their personality, need friends in different ways. Some people, there are people who can have one friend, one true best friend for life. That's all they need. Some people, like my mom has said, and she'll say, it's like, she doesn't need friends. She has family. So, she has kids. She has, brothers and sisters. She has family.
She says that, but she still has a ton of friends.
Oh, she has. she has a ton of Facebook friends.
Facebook
everyone.
friends, yeah.
But and that's kind of maybe getting into the definition of what it is to be a friend.
Right.
Because you can have you have a sanguine who has 100, 200 friends, versus a melancholic or a phlegmatic who has one or two or three friends.
I call them buddies and friends.
Buddies and friends.
I
Yeah,
have
is that a good?
3 friends, and then I have a ton of buddies.
Yeah. And
but you got a brother that you're close to too.
Yeah.
So and that's
all
really
my
helpful.
Friends are like brothers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like the kind of people when they show up, they don't need to knock on the door. Just walk right in.
Yeah.
Kind of friends. And I think everyone should have at least a couple friends like that throughout their life, but.
But you think about it, if those friends if they're work friends and they're not Catholic, okay, and you go out to dinner with them or lunch with them or whatever it is, what are you going to talk about? You
can't ever be true friends either. Because
right,
you're
yeah.
missing the most important thing that should be in your life,
Right.
and you don't see alike on that, you cannot be good. You cannot be good friends.
Right.
You can't
if you're
meet
not
on the
aligned.
same ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, if the most important thing in your life and the most important thing in his life are not aligned, you can't be good friends. I think that's why the church really pushes for spouses. You're going to be best friends for the rest of your life. You both need to be Catholic.
Yeah.
And good ones. You can have buddies.
Yeah. Friendly acquaintances. You can be, if you're at work and you say, okay, I'm not going to have any friends at work, so you're just mean and spiteful, or just completely ignore all of your coworkers. That's against charity. But you can be perfectly friendly and have good conversations and say your buddies with people at work. And I think that's perfectly fine. But I think that a true friendship is someone who helps you get to heaven and who you help get to heaven, and it's no more and no less than that. If they're someone who you consider a friend, but they're leading you to do evil, or they're just stagnant and not doing anything for you, and you're not really doing anything for them to get to that ultimate goal, heaven, then they're not truly friends.
Yeah. It used to be back in the day, and this is a strange dynamic, and I think it's part of our online, social media culture. It used to be that you lived in a suburb, let's say 1940s, 50s, post-war, you lived in a suburb, and you had people that lived next door to, you might not share a faith with, you might not share a deep connection with, but you still, you could talk to them about your children, you could talk to them about the weather, you could talk to them about the state of things, the community, whatever, and you at least had a little bit of conversation with people like that. Now, today we have become so fragmented, so ideological, and I think we've become kind of one-dimensional in the sense that I can't remember. I mean, the last neighbors we had that we could actually talk with were, I think we were living in Olathe, and they were Mennonites. And they're good people. You could talk to them about morality. You could talk about children. I mean, you could have a conversation over the fence with them. Right. And it wasn't deep. I wouldn't consider them friends, but at least they were acquaintances. As somebody that you could have a reasonable conversation with. That's all gone now.
And a lot of that, I think, it stems in this Gen Z, the newer generations, and technology, social media, where everything has progressively become more shallow. And you just have this, you don't have, people in general are more shallow, and they don't have deeper ideologies, and if they do, it is a singular ideology. It is their identity, that hence LGBTQ movement. You have all these wacky ideologies that becomes these people's religion, and they don't have really anything outside of it. They don't have a deeper connection, a deeper thinking, and so these people, when they interact, it's all just this purely surface level, how's the weather, and it doesn't go beyond that. It's all just shallow, relatively meaningless interaction.
I kind of agree with that, but kind of disagree. I think life has just gotten more complex and complicated, whereas back in the 50s and 60s, you didn't have the option to go sit inside and watch one of a billion programs.
You had three news channels.
You're out there, you're going to be outside, and your neighbor's standing there, and that's the best entertainment you're going to get for the night.
Right.
So you get good at it. And then even the roles of life, it was like, okay, I'm a dad. Everything was simple. I'm a dad. I go to work. I come home. We eat dinner.
Yeah.
I go to bed. We listen to the radio program.
Yeah. Simplified life, and that's another.
Now it's like you got to email so-and-so, text so-and-so,
Well, all the while you're worrying about, okay,
afterwards.
What's Ukraine doing? Okay, how is Israel doing right now? All these, these ICE agents or whatever's happening up in Minnesota, and you get
everyone has a
bombarded by
slightly
all these
different opinion
worries.
on all of those things, and so they don't even want to talk about them because they're sick of arguing.
Right.
And so then it comes down, it gets reduced to, how's the weather?
Yeah, because that's all you can talk about without risk of offending someone.
We can agree on the weather is horrible.
Yeah.
Everyone can get on that board.
That unites us.
Mark Twain.
Else.
Everybody complains about the weather. Nobody ever does anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they were having the ice protests in Fremont, a couple of guys were like, yeah, I guess they're having some protests, whatever. And there was that really cold week where we got that ice storm. And I was like, man, I hate this weather too. What are you going to do about it? And they looked at me like, you are retarded. I was like, guys, that was a joke.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the, and this kind of takes us off in a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I think one of the other things when you get into the extremes, and this is not just the leftist extreme, it's the right extreme too. And let's say you get into LGBT type stuff, you get purity tests on their part. And so if you are LGBT and you say something positive about Donald Trump, you're cast out. Mm-hmm. Well, those kind of people can't have ordinary conversations with ordinary people. I hate to say, it's on our side too. You say something nice about Donald Trump and you're cast out, and so I think that there is a wearing away to the extremes, and I think you guys are right that a lot of it has to do with the options that we have, all of the different the complexities of life. It gets us just spun out from the middle, and things are so complicated that we don't have much in common anymore.
Yeah, and it's funny that I've been working up in Woodbine, Iowa with Dominic, my brother Dominic, in electrical, and for lunch most of the days of the week I go over to this little bakery that's run by run by one guy who is the owner, manager, chef, busboy, what have you. He does it all.
That's cool.
He's a cool guy, and just having, and he's, and it's rare. And the reason I bring this up is, being able to, it struck me that you're able to just have a conversation with this guy, and that you're able to talk about things that isn't just the weather. You can talk about economics. We talk about politics from time to time. We talk about, baking and cooking and things like this. And, he and I disagree on a lot of stuff. He's very, and without giving too much information on this guy, he's what I'd say, your old-fashioned kind of conservative liberal hippie kind of mentality. Not to bash against him, but even though we disagree on stuff, we can still talk about it amicably. And at the end of the day, I was like, I'll be back. See you later. And it's perfectly just nice. You can talk about stuff and be friends afterward. And I feel like it's the reason that it struck me is like, how often does that ever happen with people? If you start talking to someone and you let it slip, like this actually happened with another guy who I was working with, who was in a different trade, started talking about, prices are so bad, and Trump and stuff, and I said, one good thing about Trump is at least he's getting all the illegal immigrants out, and is trying, he had a hand in helping stop federal abortions, Roe v. Wade, and this guy just lost it, shut down, said, so you're a Trump supporter, huh? And then as I should have figured by the way you were talking, and then just he rattled off a whole bunch of expletives about Trump, and then walked away, and I never talked to him again. It's just that kind
people
of
out there like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
But really, it gets into and Louis, I got to call you out in a good way here because you'll see in a minute. It gets into the area of how do we shine our light into a dark world, and part of that is the way we interact, not just with friends, but the way we interact with coworkers. And we look at everybody as a precious soul that God wants to have with Him in heaven for eternity. And of course, most of them are stupid, but at the same time, it's fertile ground. And Louis, of all the people I've known, you're probably one of the best I've ever seen in terms of actually bringing that light into the workplace, and having the conversations that on the one hand can actually get them thinking in godly, in Catholic traditional type terms, but at the same time not just turn them off. And that's something I when I was your age, I remember back on working at jobs, and I think I tried to do the same thing as you, but I think I was obnoxious about it. And so everybody I talked to, I just turned them off. And I think that was my personality being caustic. And so there's something that you're doing right that I did wrong, and probably others have done wrong. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
So the one thing, I always used to be super annoying, and everyone was always like, "Oh, here he goes."
Yeah.
Kind of almost like I was a conspiracy theorist, and you start talking about something, and then everyone's like, "Oh, okay, Lewis." And I don't remember what time of year it was or what mass it was, but casting pearls before swine. And I was just thinking about that in mass. It's like, pearl before swine. And it's like, don't argue with stupid people and don't talk to stupid people. And if they show any ounce of interest, then you have all the answers. And I stopped talking more. Then most people would approach me about it from like praying prayers before meals. And I would also, I was at church and the priest talked about this. I thought that was really inspiring. And that was it. And then it just, because I was thinking about that and I wanted to say that out loud. And it wasn't really for them. It was more for me, kind of selfish, just talking about what I was thinking about. But I don't know, I've never seen any of those come to fruition. And I think I've failed to pray for a lot of the people I've talked to. Because that bishop always hits on that. You can talk someone almost to the edge there, where you just need one more step and you're there. And if the grace isn't there, it's not there. But I've always tried to keep that, and it's mostly for me. It's like my little armor going into work is I'm a Catholic. I'm going to talk Catholic, act Catholic, and I have to do it out loud and forward because I'm not an internal person. I can't get all quiet like other people I know that I work with that are Catholic. They just get quiet, they stay in their lanes, they stay in their bubbles. I have to talk to people. I have to. I'm a social guy, and so.
But you need.
So that way, if I
that,
get really loud about it, I can dictate the terms of the conversation. I'm not perfect at it, and I fail at it all the time. But going almost over the top with it makes you.
But I mean, even if you get the cogs turning in some people, and you can't bring them all the way, but at least you've planted that seed to a degree in those people's
like
minds.
Sin and heaven, hell, and purgatory gets people thinking about the future. You don't want to sit there and talk about their past and how they have to live tomorrow and Lent, and you got to be a Catholic. You got to fast. You can't eat meat every Friday for the whole year. You got to go to mass every Sunday at 8:00 in the morning for an hour in a language you don't understand. Like it's super intimidating. But you just talk about sinning, doing things for God instead of for yourself, offering up your day, just saying a little prayer in the morning, praying for other people's misfortunes. Those are the ones I usually try to hit on. Or even asking people, like, hey, can you say a prayer for me? We're going through a tough time. They think about it. Most people don't know they can pray every single day.
Right.
Most people in the world do not pray
at all.
No,
right.
It's not even.
Just say, dude, in the morning, just kneel down and just you don't even need to kneel down. While you're driving in, just say, hope you're having a good day.
Yeah, I would say that for our part, as a family, the one thing that we've done that has borne more spiritual fruit, and this is going to surprise you, more spiritual fruit than probably almost anything. I mean, we got the podcast, obviously, but just as a family, the one thing we've done more than any other bearing spiritual fruit is doing the sign of the cross before we eat at a restaurant. I can't even tell you how many times we've done that, and of course, and a lot of, if it's a big group, the whole place goes quiet while we're doing that. And the waitress, if she's bringing something out, she stops. And I mean, it's not meant to be a show. It's just meant to be grace before meals. But there's so many times we've had people come up, oh, your family is just so respectful, and I just they're so well composed, and you get so many compliments. And I think it goes back to that one small act of grace before meals in a public place has a huge impact.
And for anyone out there that really struggles to say grace before meals, I sit with like 40 guys every day in like a boxed off area called our break room. It's like a rope around the middle of the job site. And it's really almost, it's nerve-wracking a little bit to sit there alone and say your prayers. But, so you almost kind of feel awkward, but it makes them feel 10 times more awkward because they don't, they're just, you see everyone kind of squirm a little like, oh, I don't know what to do. Do I just shut up? Like, they have no idea what to do. And you kind of, it's kind of fun. I kind of, it makes everyone else kind of like, and you, I don't know, you had a little control of the room for a second. But everyone does get quiet, even if you're just by yourself and you don't want to be over there just like,
Yeah.
But I mean, it'll draw attention.
Yeah.
If you're just something as simple as grace before meals, it's just an example of carrying your light forward and not hiding your light under a bushel. Is that it's easy for Catholics, we live our lives and hopefully all of us live our faith, and it's easy to live our faith in church. It's even relatively easy to live our faith at home, where we're not surrounded by the world, by adversity, but to live our faith in public and around friends, around non-Catholic friends or buddies, or at work, to live your faith just even through little things like making the sign of the cross, not laughing at impure jokes or not partaking in that, or walking away from bad conversations, things like that is what gets more than I think more than most words or most conversations will get people's minds turning. It's like, hey, it's like this guy just didn't laugh at this joke I made. It's like, why? Well, like why didn't what was wrong with the joke? It's like, maybe that wasn't such a good joke after all. It gets just a little bit of a the cogs turning, and that's I think is it Saint Francis de Sales said, preach always, use words when necessary.
Right.
So I mean by just preaching by your example, just by the lives we live, is a very kind of, it's not not to be too braggadocious about it, but it's kind of it is heroic to be surrounded by the world, by the devil, and by all of the temptations therein in public and at work, and to say, nope, I'm a Catholic, I'm gonna make the sign of the cross before I eat, and if anyone gives me a funny look, then so be it.
And it's really easy. Just doing the basic things is really easy. We make it complicated, and that's actually something that you do really well. Is you're really optimistic about everything.
Yeah, that's a fault of mine.
It's a great.
Better to be a white pillar than a black pillar.
The whole world is just pessimistic, and nothing's gonna, and it's such a miserable way to live.
Yeah,
and if you think about that when you're, even with your spiritual life to some degree, like, man, this is hard. It's too hard to add a little here, add a little there, or just do the basics. It's just, I'm struggling already. I can't do more. It's such a, I'm guilty of that a lot through my life. And it's just recently I've been trying to do the exact opposite. It's like, this is super easy. There's hardly anything expected from us. Yeah. It's like, don't sin and pray your prayers and just give it, give it your all, and
and keep it simple. Yeah, it's to try to uncomplicate the world around you. That it's pretty easy to be a Catholic in principle, in theory. In practice, it can be an act of heroic sacrifice just to live out the precepts of our faith. But
today it is.
I mean, today it is, but in theory, it's simple. Follow the 10 Commandments, follow the laws of the Church, keep your nose clean, and you're good to go.
I mean, all of Christ's message through the Bible is very simple instructions. It's not, and I'm a fairly simple guy, and sometimes I read some spiritual books that are not meant for me, and it'll really mess with me because I'm like, I'm not doing enough, and I need to start changing my whole entire pattern, and it's just not that complicated for a guy like me. I don't have a brain that needs it to be explained in such a complex manner to change. It's pretty simple. Our Lord made it very simple. If you're having a hard time understanding what our Lord was saying, or you want to get to the bottom of it, then maybe go read some of those.
There's always the material for it, but not everyone needs to have the Summa by St. Thomas Aquinas memorized in order to lead a good life.
Right. Some of the best advice we've ever gotten was from Father Bernard Utley, who's he's out of public spotlight right now. But he said at one point, he's given a spiritual class, and he said, in the bottom line, there's two absolute essentials to our faith: love God, be sorry for your sins. He said everything else, the Rosary, the Mass, the Lent, everything else that we do supports those two precepts: love God, be sorry for your sins. And part of loving God is open that communication with Him. Just, you can tell Him what's going on, or if you need a favor, or if you just you appreciate what He's given you today, or whatever it is. Start that dialogue. It can be with our Blessed Mother, it can be with the saints, or whatever. But sometimes that's the easy. In the last few minutes before you go to, it's so powerful. Last few minutes before you go to sleep at night, and you just dedicate those last couple of minutes to your relationship with God and having a dialogue or monologue with Him, and it actually affects your dreams and it affects your subconscious. So these are really good things, and it's so simple.
And I think that there's a misconception I had for a time, and I think that a lot of people might have as well, is that when you're praying, it has to be, okay, I have to flip through this and find this prayer here, or I have to go through my missal, or it has to be an actual make the sign of the cross and say a prayer with an amen at the end. And that's, yes, those are prayers.
Those are good.
And they're good.
They're good. Yeah.
They're composed by people a lot smarter and holier than us, but prayer can be so much more simple and personal. Is it, God, I need help with this right now? Yeah. Like, throw me a branch, will ya? It's like I was like, okay, I need this intention to work out. Saint Jude, or whoever, Saint Hubert, or whoever, whatever you're praying for, is that okay? Do some work for me, okay? Please, I need some help right now. Just you do me a little bit of this, and I'll pray. I'll pray a decade of the Rosary in return if I get what I'm asking for. And it's simple things like that. It can be.
Well, that's like the first thing you kind of learn in catechism as a kid is know, love, and serve God.
Right.
Now, how do you know God? How do you know anybody and anything? You spend time with them in usually dialogue. You sit there and you have conversations. That's usually why most marriages fail, is because there's not enough communication.
Right.
And you fall out of love. And you don't know that person, and they always say, "Oh, you're a stranger to me."
Right.
And if you want to grow that, you have to talk to God, and it doesn't have to be a constant offering. Offer, but you're not sitting there constantly just offering everything and asking for things. It's also just, how was your day? How was I today? It sounds silly, but what's that story with the farmer that was sitting in the chapel? Bishop always tells it.
Well, I don't know if it's what's the one you're talking about. This guy who, every day before he went in to, take care of the farm or going to work, he'd stop in chapel and say, "Hi, Jesus, it's Jimmy." And he just, years and years, he'd go into chapel and say it. And then one day he was, I don't know if he's on his deathbed, but he was, very, very sick. And, his family was gathered around him. And then, out of nowhere, everyone heard, hi, Jimmy, it's Jesus. And I don't know all the details of the story, but it's just one of those little It's like, ooh.
Yeah, I've never heard.
We were-
I've never heard that.
We were in Olathe and getting ready to go somewhere, and we were taking a sister. I don't know if we were going shopping or whatever it was, but so it was Lisa, me, and the sister. And I won't name her to for the sake of the innocent here, but anyways, we were getting ready to go, and she said, "Okay, just a minute, let me go say goodbye to my husband." And literally went in
awesome.
and took 30 seconds and said goodbye to her husband.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean that was so beautiful.
But
And
and I think it's that gets lost by. I think it doesn't come very naturally to like Gen Z or to kids to young adults. I don't think it comes very naturally to just say hi every once in a while to Jesus. Like hi. You stub your toe. Thanks. You find a tool you're missing. Thank you. It's just to throughout the day, just say hi. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that as you mature more, as you get older and more wise and experienced, it can come more naturally, and you get into the habit of it. But I think it's a incredibly valuable, especially to form that habit, like when you're in school or when you've recently gotten out of school, as a young adult, to just get into the habit of just saying thank you. Just for everything, for the good, for the bad, for the indifferent. Just thanks for being alive. As to keep that, just like the sister. Just let me go say goodbye to my husband before I go shopping.
right.
It's so easy to get in your own head and just forget about it. To live your faith in chapel, and when you maybe do your rosary. And maybe morning prayers and maybe night prayers, and to outside of that, to be just kind of in your own mind, in your own land, in your in living your own life relatively devoid of God as a constant.
Living in the presence of God, not just constantly whipping yourself and praying.
Yeah.
No, it's a great. I remember a great line. It just stuck with me forever. A lot of years ago, Father Anaya, I think it was at boys camp, and he was giving a little sermon. He said, "So, would you go over to one of your friend's house and break out a book and say, 'Hey, I enjoy being here'?" No, it's like that's on.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the words that we say, even the rosary, the words of the rosary are there as a tool, as a vehicle to help us raise our mind and hearts. Just the recitation of the words are relative. I mean, they're perfect words, obviously, but just the recitation of them is relatively meaningless. It's the spirit, it's the devotion, it's the raising of our hearts and minds to God that's behind it. That's the real prayer. Mm-hmm. And of course, now I will say this about the rosary, though, it's because rosary kind of fills its own place. Just the act, even if that's all you can do in a given day, is just I don't have it today. All I'm going to be able to do is just recite the words of it. There is still a discipline to it that just to the actual devotion of the discipline and doing that every day by itself is of value. It's something I see with Protestants, that the Protestants for a time, they go and they have their entertainment and they go to their Sunday worship and all that kind of stuff, and they're on fire for God, and then that fervor dies out and they got nothing. They got no baseline to fall back on except for the assumption, hey, I'm saved, and so if you are praying that rosary, that's your baseline. So yeah, there are going to be days when that's all you do is just recite the words, and that's you tried, and God appreciates the fact that you try, but it does serve as a baseline too. So the rosary is a little bit different.
Yeah, and I think that in this world, in this day and age, being able to tread water is a victory.
Yeah.
Being able to do that baseline is a victory. Because as you're always going up or you're going down. There is no, stasis. But when you're even just doing, because it's not a commandment to pray the rosary. It's not a precept of the church to pray the rosary. There's no law saying you have to pray your morning prayers, night prayers, or rosary. But just doing. But also, I think St. Alphonsus Liguori has a book just called Prayer. I'm pretty sure in that book, he kind of he expounds on the point that without prayer above and beyond what is strictly commanded by the church, you won't be saved. So you won't be, the church gives you the absolute bare minimum, you cannot count on that bare minimum to save your sorry self. You have to do something more. And even if that's just the rosary and just morning prayers, night prayers, and an occasional, prayers before meals, and if you can, prayers after meals, it's those little extra things that keep you treading water above the minimum. You don't want to be, you don't want to squeak your way into heaven, by your fingertips. But if you just...
That's what my mom would always say. She says, you want to aim for heaven, not for purgatory, because if you miss heaven, you're landing in purgatory. If you miss purgatory, you're going to hell.
Right.
Yeah.
So don't do the bare minimum. Bare minimum gets you to purgatory.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Imagine missing that shot,
Yeah. I mean, it behooves us to dream big and be ambitious as far as heaven goes.
Right.
You might be ambitious about your career or about, worldly ambitions, but in the end, if you're not being ambitious and diligent and, dreaming big about your place in heaven, then
you only get one shot.
One shot of that
forever.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Even people that are ambitious and make tons of money and they build these great companies, they all have the same thing in common, where they see the goal, and then they reverse back to where they're at, and they say, okay, so what's the first step? Because you're not going to get there in one giant leap. It's not like, okay, first step to building a $1 billion company, build a $1 billion company. That's not
Yeah,
step one.
Right.
Step one is, okay, what's my industry that I need to learn about? Let's go get a job there.
Right.
And then maybe, do I need a degree? And you step it that way. But the only reason they're dreaming of $1 billion is because someone else has done that. And it's like, you can do the same thing with your spiritual life and other saints, to look at, the Francis of Assisi's, the St. Anthony's, Louis Marie de Montfort's, and see how far and how amazing they became. It didn't just happen overnight.
Right.
It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it's so if you want to get to those points, you have to, kind of like you're saying, William, you have to, first let's tread water, and then we'll learn to swim a little better, and then next thing you know, you're doing freestyle like Michael Phelps, and you're doing really well.
Then that...
Step one, you have to want it.
Yeah.
And that literally is step one. You have to want it.
Yeah.
And because if you don't want it, if you're ambivalent, oh yeah, I'd really like to go to heaven, but I don't. It's not fire in my belly. You'll have 3 or 4 days of real spiritual fervor, and then it'll just die out from there. So you got to want it.
That's like another famous moment in the life of St. Thomas Aquinas. I think his sister came to him and said, my illustrious brother, how do I get to heaven? And expecting some lengthy diatribe on all the virtues and the commandments. He said, you have to will it.
Yeah,
you have to will it. And if you don't have the ambition, if you don't have the will for it, if you don't want it, truly want it, then you're never going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that was
well said. Will I am.
See, Father Philip told that story to me with no small amount of irony.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started reading, just because I don't read a ton, but I started reading this book they had in the back of church. It's just 12 Steps to Holiness, and it just goes through a virtue for each month. And you could read a half a page a day and get done halfway through the month. So it's something you kind of just browse throughout the month. But this month is hope, and that was the first little section in there. Was you can't hope unless you have a fire to be with Christ. Like, you cannot obtain the virtue of hope, because what are you hoping for? You have to really want it and put your will to it and your mind to it, and then that's when hope comes in, is because then when you start doubting yourself and maybe but the only reason you're doubting yourself is because you really want it, and then hope comes in. But you can't obtain it unless you want to get to heaven.
And here's I don't know, not a thought experiment, but an idea for consideration. How, practically speaking, how do you want it? I mean, it's easy to say, I want to get to heaven. It's easy to even feel it after you say it, I want to get to heaven. But how do you visualize it? How do you practically keep that before you? Because it's easy to talk a good talk about it. True. And even to keep it alive within you whenever you're at chapel. But how do you instill that in yourself, a true desire to get to heaven? And what is heaven? Why do I want to get there? How do you keep that alive throughout your life, but throughout your day? That's something that I've had struggles with myself, as just reminding yourself that want to get to heaven. I need to do good and avoid bad because I want to get to heaven. But it's easy to lose sight of, okay, why do I want to get to heaven? Because you're living in the here and now. You're living in the present, surrounded by material things, and you know that heaven is something entirely beyond what we can comprehend.
Yeah, why do I want to die?
Yeah, it's like, wait,
I don't
it's like, I don't want to die. Yeah. But,
right, you don't want the negative, you want the positive. I guess the analogy I'll use sometimes is, okay, I'm 15 years old, and, perhaps God endowed me with good physical strength, and I'm 6'2", and all that, and I want to be a professional football player. Okay, I want to grow up and I want to play in the NFL, or I want to play in the NBA, whatever it is. And that's your desire. Well, you know that to get there, you got a lot of work ahead of you, but that is your driving goal, and you're right. I think that when we spiritualize that, we try to say, okay, we've got to get our mindset around heaven is so much greater than being an NFL football player, which is just vanity basically, and maybe make a good living and everything, but that I think is maybe it's just a matter of reading up on the four last things: death, heaven, judgment, death, judgment, heaven, hell, and trying to get an appreciation for just how great heaven is and just how meaningless this life is, and the vanities of the vanity of vanity, all of vanity, right? Mm-hmm. And how worthless all of that is. That's not something that you're right. It's not something that speaks to our carnal minds, because it's beyond what our carnal mind. We want to eat. We want to just basically take care of our lower needs. But these are higher spiritual needs that I think we have to really work toward.
And I guess a lot of the saints too, they've had massive doubts, and I think everyone does, and it's not like it's like you're saying, it's not an easy thing to wrap your brain around. I mean, sometimes you fall into little lapses of just just kind of coasting, not doing anything.
What's the point of it all?
And then, and a lot of the saints, they always say that whenever they were in those situations, it's make a act of faith, a firm act of faith, and two, also just I think learning about the faith. Father Bernard Utley, his spiritual talks, they're on YouTube, and
they're so good. So good.
But he talks about just like hell is the absence of God. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about it, like right now, he's always with us. He is keeping us in existence and everything. And losing that is just in this life is already terrifying. That's death. And then you think about, I could get more of this life in the future rather than less of his life in my world, in the future as well, which is hell. But thinking that way always kind of sometimes you need to scare your way out of it.
Yeah, there are spiritual teachers, and there's I've read for spiritual teachers who teach that the fires of hell, the physical torments of hell, are actually a favor to the condemned, because it's a little bit of a distraction away from the true greatest pain of hell, which is the loss of God. Mm-hmm. So, that's...
Well, Father Dominic, one of the ladies in California, she came up to him and was like, do you think it's fine that you're talking about these exorcisms and stuff and the things that you're doing with, he doesn't just talk about exorcism in sermons, he references things and says you need to be careful and kind of a warning. And he's like, I need to talk about these things. Kids need to fear hell.
Right.
Yeah.
You need
Right.
to fear that.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing to fear.
Yeah, and that's imperfect contrition consists of the fear of the loss of heaven and the pains of hell. And for a lot of us, that's it's imperfect contrition does not mean bad. It just means it's not as good as perfect contrition, but it is easier to tangibly latch onto a fear of loss and a fear of hell, a fear of torment, a fear of pain, because we understand pain.
Yeah.
It's harder to have that perfect contrition of loving God for everything, for loving God for God's sake, for what God is, and for what God has done for us. It's a little bit more.
Well, and if you're fearful of hell, you're most likely sooner or later, depending on your IQ, going to come to the conclusion to avoid hell, I need to go in the opposite direction, which is going to lead to growth in your spiritual life and embracement of God, knowing, loving, and serving Him.
Mm-hmm.
Like St. Christopher kind of had that life. Inevitably came around and was carried him on his shoulders and carried the world. But yeah, I think that's
Yeah, and it's
sometimes you gotta spook your way into believing stronger.
Right.
and sometimes it's funny that a conversation that I had a little bit ago. It's just been rattling around in my head. We were at Grandpa and Grandma's with Pino. It was when we were talking about animals. Do animals go to heaven?
Oh my
Okay,
goodness!
so that was a
We gotta get Michelle
we
on
gotta
here.
get Michelle on here, yeah, because it's something that you
Don't
might
listen,
not think
Dossie.
about if you're not a big animal person. It's like animals don't go to heaven. Okay,
They don't have
they don't
immortal souls
have
like we do.
immortal
Yeah,
souls, so
right.
they don't go to heaven. Kind of end of story. But if you're really attached to your animals, as there are certain people whom I know and love, well, yeah, if you are attached to your animals and you love your animals, you want to think that in heaven you'll have that everything that you love here on earth, which will include your animals and your loved ones who make it there, and in a perfect a way to physically think of heaven, because after the end of time, the renewal of the earth, heaven will be a physical place. Mm-hmm. It'll be the earth made new, and you have to think that, okay, will Dossie be there? Will we have Dossie? Will we have all of our comforts and the things that we loved here on earth? And so we got talking about that. Who, boy, did we? That was an unexpected, heated conversation.
There are two trains of thought.
Two trains of thought on it.
I think they're both valid.
Yeah, they're both valid. And in the end,
But basically, the thought, I just should say this, and so that people don't think that animals have immortal souls, because they don't.
Right.
But if the animals can't, the thinking on the other side is that God can recreate them as adornments in heaven.
And that's the opinion of St. Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, really?
So we each called our lifeline of a priest into our corner, and unfortunately for my opposition, both priests took my side. So more or less, that at the end of time, the earth will be made new. All things will be made new. Animals are part of all things, and hence it is perfectly safe to come to the conclusions there will be animals in heaven. Now, will animals enjoy the beatific vision? No. They don't have immortal souls. They haven't been baptized. They can't deserve it.
They have no free will.
They have no free will.
Yeah.
However, as a physical place that heaven will be, it's perfectly fine to think and to be comforted by the fact that, yeah, we'll have our pets in heaven.
But their soul, their anime, their soul can be reanimated,
made new.
Yeah.
But they won't be they won't be partaking of heaven. They will be in heaven for us. Mm-hmm. And so that's a kind of thing that when I was talking about, okay, how can you tangibly think of heaven? Because I think for a lot of people who might think of heaven, they think, okay, this big golden city, whatever, gates and kind of clouds and harps and and a lot of people are like, that doesn't seem very exciting.
Yeah.
And I've found myself, thinking of that. From time
Feeling
to
a little
time.
underwhelmed
Yeah,
by
it's just
it.
it's like the biblical description of heaven is like, I'd much rather be, sitting on a chair drinking my coffee with petting Dossie.
I've heard people that are like, yeah, I don't know, heaven seems kind of lame. I'd rather go to hell and go to a rock concert.
Yeah, it's like, at least
like,
they'll have
that's
company
not
there,
what
right?
it is.
It was like,
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's something, if we want to visualize it, I think it's perfectly fine to visualize heaven as everything good about earth, everything good about this life magnified to infinity by God's presence.
Right.
And it's, I think some people, and I've found myself thinking, okay, so in heaven, is it just everyone's like, just their eyes are just glued on God and that's it for all eternity? Yeah. Now, of course, that is
it's part of it.
That's part of it, and it's infinitely good. But as, earthlings, as, pathetic humans, it's like, but what if I don't want that? And I think that, that can be a little bit intimidating for people. But
that's true, because that's one of the things that I've just always, on purpose, never thought about.
Yeah, because
here's an interesting story that who was the disciple of St. John Bosco that's also St. Aloysius?
St. Dominic Savio.
St. Dominic Savio. I believe it was St. Dominic Savio appeared to St. John Bosco in a dream. I mean, obviously St. John Bosco had a lot of dreams. And in this dream, he looked like he was appearing to him in heaven. And was communicating with him. And St. John Bosco says to him, he says, "Are we actually in heaven right now?" And St. Dominic Savio said, No, this is just a little chamber that God created for this little event that feels like heaven. You could not even begin to understand how glorious heaven actually is. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and that's part of, and that's it, to have that going forward. When you wake up in the morning, when you pray your morning prayers, when you pray Rosary, it's like, okay, I want to get there. That's where I want. That's right. Where I want to end up.
The Bible talks about our life as a race, and that's an analogy that really hits me hard, and especially for somebody. I just turned 60, right? So I look at it as I just started the fourth quarter of life, unless I make it into overtime and into my 80s, right? Yeah, but no, I just turned 60, and so I look at life as a race, and by golly, I want to make sure that when I hit that finish line, I have given every ounce of effort that I could possibly give. Because, I mean, who would want to go through a race and sit back and sit on a couch for 10 years when you're running a race, right? I mean, you want to get to the point where you when you hit that finish line, when you die, you hit that finish line, it should be with your last breath. And, and I hate to name names. I look at our friend Dan Hansen up the road here. He's in his 90s now. And he goes to Mass every day still, and he's suffering physically. And he's a guy who's going to he's going to die, who knows when, but when he died, he's going to have run that race, and he's going to hit the finish line with his last breath. And I mean, God bless him, and anybody who has devoted their life to running the race in a way that we run it to our fullest.
Yeah, there's we run the race in order to win the crown.
Right.
We don't want to walk it, sit down every couple minutes because it's too hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, to get through this veil of tears, we're trying to go out with a bang as far as we can.
Yeah, I'm sure the first 2 quarters of your life is figuring out how this race is ran.
Right.
Yeah, adjusting to the enemy's defense.
And then the second half is where you can really go berserk on it.
Yeah.
And start pushing really hard.
It was one of the reasons. I mean, this is a tangent, of course, but we lived in Las Vegas for a while, and would go and we go down the Vegas Strip or whatever, and just kind of check out the lights and everything. But But on that rare occasion when you would go into a casino to go have dinner or something like that, you would see just rows of old people, and they'd be like in their 70s and 80s, and they would just be playing the slot machines. And it's kind of like, guys, you're going to be dying here before too much longer. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your money. This is probably the worst pursuit you could possibly have as an old person. And it's not too much different sitting down in front of the TV and watching garbage, or basically mind trash, or mind... Wait. Got a fan club here.
There's security.
Yeah.
Security detail.
He's scratching here. He's making a nuisance out of himself. But no, for people who are wasting their time, I think, just sitting watching TV all day, or doom scrolling all day, and it's like, time is the most precious gift that God gives us in this world, and we don't have that much of it. You don't even know how much you have, and to waste it, to me, is just, who was it, Saint Alphonsus, who made the pledge that he would never waste a minute of his life, and he did.
Wrote like 90 plus books.
Yeah.
And it
doesn't have to be like work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be where you're working for your whole life, every ounce of your time.
Right.
Just make the time count. So if you're doing something, you can't watch TV and offer it up to God at the same time.
Right.
But if you are just in some form proactive,
mm-hmm.
and
you're
enjoying the day for God,
mm-hmm.
you're mm-hmm. doing things for Him. It's kind of hard to do that if you're watching TV or watching garbage and putting yourself in an occasion of sin.
Yeah.
Obviously, He's not there.
But I mean, at the same time, if you're married and you're watching something harmless, and you're growing in connection with your wife, just hanging out together, there's value in that too.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things what we talk about sometimes, is that you've got to kind of set your own standards in terms of what is productive and what is not, because rest is extremely productive. Even the monks go out and they play volleyball. They have recreation time, and so recreation, rest, all these things are productive, but we have to make them productive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy in this world to just doom scroll, and to do stuff that's not.
Where recreation is the end of the means instead of part of the means to the end.
Yeah. Right.
Where you work so you can recreate, instead of working and recreating so you can focus on what is important.
Right.
Yeah. Where recreation is that, and that's something, in most religious rules. I mean, in the minor seminary, it was, you had a time of the day where it was carved aside for recreation, mm-hmm. for entertainment,
Right.
And on the weekends, we'd watch movies. In fact, my last 2 years, we watched a bunch of Marvel and action movies, which I got thoroughly sick of. Mm-hmm. But that's beside the point. But
God wants you to have fun.
Well, yeah.
He doesn't want you to hate this life.
Right.
Yeah, he gave us these creature comforts for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Because he loves us.
He does.
Right.
Yeah, he doesn't want Earth to be hell on Earth.
Right.
He wants Earth to be, a little bit of heaven on Earth, I think.
Yeah.
And we have to utilize that in order to say, okay, this recreation is fun, but I bet heaven's going to be a lot more fun. So let's see if we can use this recreation to get just a little bit closer to that ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. But now you have all these people that their lives are consumed by pursuit of recreation. Mm-hmm. Video games, movies, doom scrolling, addictions, alcohol, what have you.
Right.
That these people are they'll put in their work the minimum amount they have to, and then they'll spend the rest on recreation that leaves them with nothing. Mm-hmm. It leaves them with nothing afterwards. They've gained nothing, and then they rinse and repeat, and they might be happy in the moment, but it doesn't bring any kind of lasting joy, and it just leads to bitterness that you see a lot of in the world.
Right, and I think this is, apologies to anybody who doesn't like Archbishop Sheen, but great line from Archbishop Sheen. He said, for most people, heaven and hell begin here on earth, and I think it's fair to say that that's just a reflection of Have you gotten closer to God, or have you gotten farther away from Him? I see people. You see people. Your entertainers, your politicians, your billionaires, and those people. If you ever watch them in action, if it's at a gala or what, they're miserable. They are miserable people, and they've gotten some momentary joys out of their money and out of their fame and all that, but they're typically miserable, and hell is beginning for them on earth because they've gotten their reward and they've grown distant from God.
Yeah, and that's something. It goes into maybe even a little bit of a deeper point, that man craves and desires and was created with purpose, to have purpose, to have motivation, to have a goal. Right. Everyone, it's hardwired in us to desire a purpose. And for religious people, especially Catholics, we have that purpose set before us. Our purpose is to get to heaven, and to that we have other smaller purposes: to raise a good family, to raise children in the faith, to have a love for the faith, to go and proselytize with our coworkers, our buddies at work. We have all these smaller purposes that feed to the larger ultimate goal. For these worldlings, for these people, for all your celebrities and 90+% of your population, they don't have that purpose. And they have a desire for the purpose, but they don't have anything beyond themselves. And so the best that they can seek is the purpose of, okay, I'm going to get $1 billion. Mm-hmm. You get that $1 billion, now what?
Yeah.
Okay.
I need another $1 billion.
Yeah.
You have the purpose, drive that's just naturally in you, but if you don't use your free will to choose, you're never, you're going to pick yourself. Mm-hmm. But you could think that's the big sacrifice of life, is not choosing yourself and following our Lord's example, especially coming into Lent, just picking up the cross and carrying it no matter what. Didn't complain, he could have done that a billion different ways and made the same exact sacrifice. But
it's to have, but you can do that and be more happy. You can be more happy in sorrow. You can be more happy in suffering than any of these, celebrities, any of the most famous people you can think of have throughout their entire lives. Mm-hmm. You can have more true joy from making the Stations of the Cross by stubbing your toe and saying thank you afterwards, and then having $1 billion, 5 mansions, and all the pleasures that the world can offer, because there's a purpose to there's a reason we run the course. They have no reason they run the course. They're running around in circles until they fall dead of exhaustion.
Well, and you notice they're all obsessed with trying to prolong their lives.
Because I think a lot of them, freaks. Because they are health freaks, and a lot of they get into cryogenics and stuff like that because they fear judgment. They know God places in our hearts as part of the natural law. We know we're going to be judged after this life is over. But it has somebody who grew up without faith, and who had a certain natural spiritual bent, I think, about me. I remember being kind of fascinated with the meaning of life, and of course it was in a non-Christian sense. And you're always like you're looking for the meaning of life, and you would see these different philosophers, you would see cartoons or whatever it was, and you're looking for the meaning of life, and it was something you were never going to actually ever achieve, to find the meaning of life. Okay, well, it hit me as a Catholic, maybe 10 or 15 years into being Catholic, that the meaning of life is question number 2 on a 7-year-old's catechism. Okay, well, who made you? God made me. Why did God make you? God made me to know, love, and serve Him in this world so that we can be happy with Him in the next. That's the meaning of life. And it's like crazy. Yeah. I've spent my whole childhood trying to figure out the meaning of life, and there it was, question number 2 in the catechism. Yeah, and it's when as a society, as a culture, as a people, we had that knowledge. We had that as we're here to know, love, and serve God so we can be happy with Him in the next. That's when you had your St. Peter's Basilica made. That's when you had all of your great
a lot of your great achievements as a society, all of your greatest buildings, your great cathedrals made, because they were built for something higher than us. And it wasn't, there wasn't any question or doubt. It was, we're going to make this great cathedral because it's for God, and that's kind of why we're here. We're here for God. And, you had, the biggest crack, of course, started with the Protestant revolt. And then throughout, from, 1500s on, it's been a decline into we're here for ourselves to get everything we can. We want to suck every ounce of joy that we can out of this world and come what may afterwards. Humanism, taking God out of the equation, making ourselves God.
From God first to man first. That's modernism, that's Vatican II, that's Protestantism, that's Luther. It's all put into one package. God first to man first.
Protestantism's so successful, it's like, no wonder. That sounds great.
Yeah, it does. On a purely surface level, it does. Yeah. It's like, get everything we can and still be happy and fine afterward. They very craftily threw out human responsibility. Right. Responsibility to a higher power. That we owe something back for the happiness we have here. That we owe everything we have and everything we are to the one who created us. And that's one of the tenets back when I was in the major seminary for a bit. It's one of the things we covered in Defense of the Faith is, as once you admit that there is a God who created us, it is logical and it is the natural conclusion that we owe everything back to that God. If there is an infinite being and we ourselves are finite, we owe it inherently and necessarily to give back everything we can to that infinite being, because we are inferior and God is superior. Just from his mere existence, we owe everything to him. And that's something that your Protestants, your modernists, and a lot of your other religions, they throw that out. Yeah, God's there, and we don't really owe him anything, and he will make us happy. And
God's a useful idiot. Basically, if I need something, he gives it to me, and and that's about my relationship with him.
Yeah, sin and sin boldly, but believe even more boldly.
Well, and to your point, it's like when people start actually putting in the work and taking the responsibility and growing, it makes parishes just flourish.
Yeah,
I've seen, you start seeing group chats, groups form, people doing devotions together. The Roseman Church with my sisters, they started the Tarsicians down there. They're doing that in Minnesota, and you're getting these moms that are getting super proactive, and these dads that are getting super proactive in the faith, and you can see it. We're getting this huge amount of nuns coming in, like larger numbers than ever in the seminary. It's because of the productivity of parents and of men and the women in the parish giving back. And when you give back, you seem to receive more, not necessarily physically, but you receive a piece.
Energetically. And this might sound a little bit new agey, but you go down to some of these I've not been up to Toronto or to Father Saunders in London. I hear this about him, but I have been to Arizona. And it's another chapel, it's another parish very much like this. I think, Idaho's like this too. That there is just an energy. There's an energy there that people are on fire for their faith, and the men's group are active, and they do some really cool stuff with the men's group, and they have the sisters, and the school's thriving. And when you have that, if people come in off the street and they feel it, they know that there's something special going on.
I want that.
Yeah.
And they will go and get it.
And
they see other people doing it, and it's like,
and they want to do
possible.
it. Well, and we've been and I won't name the ones that are on the flip side, but there are vintage parishes that are on the flip side of that, where things are just spiritually dead. People are going to mass on Sunday, and that's all the reason they're there. Their kids in it. They end up losing their children, and basically over time the parish just dies out. And so you see that as well. It's a spiritually dead chapel, but every one of us can be a part of the life of the parish, and that's
it's so important because going back to friends, buddies, acquaintances. We are social beings. We need to interact with other people. No man is an island. And when you are confident, okay, we just had our St. Valentine's Day dinner that was hosted by the sisters and the senior students here. Just yesterday, there were 60 people there. There were 60 attendees there.
Married couples.
Wow,
there.
that's awesome.
And that was like, wow, that was awesome. In fact, such to the point that the helpers got like one small bite of steak, and that was it, because we didn't have quite enough steaks to go around for the helpers.
I was like $120.
Shout out to Father
so-
Sanquist. That was
Yeah.
good.
Thank you, Father.
But things like that, as a member of the parish, you're also a member of that community.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are closer in that community and you do things together and you're part of all these group chats, and talking to people who are in the church, at a party, the Sunday, pancakes and eggs breakfast or what have you, it's easier to live your faith. It's easier to practice it knowing that, okay, I have all these people who do the same thing I do. I have all these people who believe the same thing I do and who I know will pray for me if I ask them to.
Yeah.
If you're struggling with something, you can talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Or if you're succeeding, people can come and say, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
It's
it
perfect church.
Yeah, and it starts
Yeah.
a snowball effect of of good work building on good work, building on everyone trying to come together for the sake of everyone else
And the same goal. And
the same goal.
Yes, it's a
and
beautiful
that's
thing.
something that I think the Protestants, of course, they're false religion and don't condone them at all, but they have a sense of community with each other that is admirable on a surface level. Now there isn't that much.
There's no depth,
no depth to
right?
it.
But they do well. And the Protestants, I mean, the devil doesn't entice people with a straight, exact inversion of the truth. He's got to give you a certain amount of goodness and truth and joy and things like that in order to entice anybody in. And I mean, the Satanists, I guess, may be the one exception. They may be the flip side, but
Really
but the Protestants, I mean, they preach personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and it's like, I hate to tell you guys, they're right when it comes to that being an objective of what we need to do as our faith. They preach fellowship, which again is not the faith itself, and of course, where they fall flat is that they're basically their idea of worship is entertainment.
Yeah.
And ours, of course, is worship. And so, I mean, there are huge flaws with Protestants. But you can't go to a Protestant church and realistically think you're going to save your soul. But as a Catholic, especially, but they do some things right.
They have a castle built on sand while we have a nice little villa built on stone.
Right.
Now they are all about ostentatious and go and, hey, fellow brother, come here and join our service, and then we're all going to go together and have a picnic.
God will make you a millionaire.
Yeah, and Catholics aren't nearly as much like that. But you go into the a parish function and you're welcome, and everyone's there, and it's built on a deeper foundation of truth and trust. And it's not just, oh hey, yeah, you're a good guy, and I like what you're saying. It's we agree on deeper things, and we are confident in our knowledge of truth and the faith on a deeper level.
Well, and that's something I think it's brilliant what the devil has done by creating so many false churches, and they all have a little tweak from each other, even though they're all revolved around Christ. They're all tweaked a little, and it starts these little battles, and people argue about the nitty-gritty, and they say, you know what, it doesn't even matter. And it really does matter, because who are we worshiping here? You?
Yeah.
Is this the church of whatever your name is?
Yeah.
This isn't your church. You don't get to decide. Like, it's been spelled out clearly, and that drives me up a wall. I've talked to so many people. They're like, yeah, they're all pretty much the same. It's like, no, they're not.
Yeah.
One does the will of God. The rest do not.
Yeah, and that follows the kind of underlying fault. One of the underlying faults of Protestantism is that in the foundational truth of Protestantism is man gets to decide.
Yeah.
We are on level with God. We get to decide how we're going to worship Him, what church we get to use, versus Catholics where God told us what to do and we're going to do what He tells us to do,
right,
versus what we want to do for Him. We have the firm knowledge of what Christ teaches, what He wants us to do, and Protestants are, it's all about kind of how we see Jesus as our personal Savior, because it's all about how we want to worship and accept Him into our lives and be saved by Him.
Cake shop
and
for Jesus.
Interesting observation. I heard from a priest a lot of years ago who said that for the Protestants, Christ Himself becomes basically an idealized self-image. So if you are severe, Christ is severe. If you're joyful, Christ is joyful. If you're, whatever it is, and only one faith, of course, understands the true Christ, who that's the Catholic Church, who is all merciful and all just, and
all of everything.
All of everything,
fun
right?
To chew on in your brain. All of everything.
Yeah. And that's something that I don't remember who said this. I know someone. I think I heard it from a priest. You Protestants, you worship Jesus how you want. I'm going to worship Jesus how He wants.
Yeah.
It's like yeah.
That was radio replies.
Was it? Okay. Yes, I know. Yeah, heard that from
Bishop Pivarunus. I tell that story.
Yeah.
So.